Hello, 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 hello.
The winner.
There we are.
We are all on, right? I believe we are.
Yep.
Brass, can you
We're
hear
here.
both of us?
Yep, I hear everybody. I see.
All
you.
right, and today you look like this amazing woman.
Oh, blessing.
Dan, any idea who she is?
She's the famous presenter, right?
That's right. That's right. She is North Korea's most famous anchor. She was allegedly born in 1943. She was a trained actress, and I think as theater kids we can all appreciate the amount of theater that goes in North Korea. But her name is Ri Chun-hee, and she has held the nation's hand through many a difficult moment, and she is known as, I think, in the West and in YouTube, as the super intense North Korean announcer lady. She announced the passing of Kim Il-sung in 1994, weeping her way through the broadcast, right?
Yeah.
And then she did the same for Kim Jong Il, and she announced when they had the first successful nuclear tests, when they launched their first satellite, which I don't know if it made it or not. But so she is the face of North Korea, and for our purposes, she is the face of Amanda Brass today.
Amazing. What a blessing. Big shoes.
Yeah.
Big shoes.
So I wanted us to kind of catch up on the Kims, maybe do a previously on the History Happy Hour kind of catch up. Because we did a lot about North Korea, and we did a lot about Kim Il-sung, who is like a revolutionary. Oh, by the way, did you guys notice my ensemble here?
It's a complete fetching look.
Immediately.
Yeah, it's a complete meal. Let's talk about it.
So this is my salute to Kim Jong Il. So in North Korean newspapers, and this is right, like Kim Jong Il, he's a whole thing, and I'm really excited to talk about him. But in North Korean newspapers, it was said that people in the West adopted his look, and that he was a fashion icon in the West. And so I'm officially making that true for at least the next hour.
Nice.
By sporting this fetching ensemble, and my hair did not get fluffy enough, but I tried. Anyway, so previously we talked about North Korea and Kim Il-sung and basically the long road to disaster that was the Korean War, right? And so we talked about Japanese occupation being just kind of a consistent in Korean history, that the Japanese took over in 1910. We talked about how Kim Il-sung was part of that resistance, right? And how he was how he sort of defined himself around that resistance. And then as World War II ended and the Japanese had to make concessions, Korea was partitioned, and then it became a communist state, that Stalin sort of appointed Kim Il-sung, and Kim Il-sung basically built his leadership around the cult of personality and sort of the strongman vision of Stalin, right? That was his way of approaching it. And in the middle of all of this, if you guys remember, in 1942, in the secret base at the foot of the sacred Mount Paektu, a swallow caused winter to change to spring, a star to illuminate the sky, and a double rainbow suddenly appeared.
Yeah.
Right. And that
Amazing.
was the birth of Kim Il-sung. And there's so much to unpack there, right? There's so much about who Kim Il-sung was as a young man, who Kim Jong Il was as a young man. Like, how did he grow up? But the fact that the official state description of his birth, whereas Kim Jong Il was born, Kim Il Sung was born. Man, I'm messing with hymns. Like I actually for the last episode, I kept referring back to make sure that I was getting the right Kim, and now I'm messing it up. So Kim Jong Il, when he was born, was heralded by all of these supernatural things. And when you think about like Kim Il Sung, how he was born, pretty straightforward. Like, oh, he was born here and he experienced this. But we see that with Kim Jong Il, there's already the need to elaborate.
There's myth making. They're myth making already.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit about like the apotheosis of Washington and myth making in myth making in North Korea versus myth making in the early U.S. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, just oddly, myth making becomes like a full-time pastime for North Korea, and rewriting the history and the way their leadership is perceived becomes part of the national identity in a way that gets nitroed. What was that video game where you drive cars and you boom the nitro and it would push the car? Do you guys remember that at all?
Yeah.
Video game?
Yeah.
Anyway, so it basically that's what happened, right? Like somebody pushed the nitro on North Korean propaganda. Not somebody, we know exactly who, right? And so it kind of takes off like really crazy as we see Kim Jong Il aging, Kim Il Sung aging and Kim Jong Il moving to the top, right? So a couple of things about the history around Kim Jong Il. He allegedly began to walk at age 3 weeks, right? So already, like they're saying, like at age 3 weeks he started to walk. At 8 weeks he was already talking, right? So he was allegedly walking and talking before he was 3 months old, right? And so that just sets the stage for the kind of person and the kind of like, I mean, it's tough to believe. And why would they need to create all of these myths around him when they didn't feel the need to create those myths around his dad? Anyone care to speculate?
He's 5'3".
Right.
No, but wait. I have a real idea beside that. When your eternal leader, when your premier supreme leader is of a humble beginning and turns his life force into the creation of the People's Republic of North Korea, your son has to take over for you, and people need to fear and love your son as much as the original. I feel as though they were trying to pour all these, he matured so fast, he's smarter than everybody, in order to make sense of the fact that he would be very young when he took over command for his dad. I think he would be so young, people would laugh at him or think he doesn't have any experience. But if they make up this myth that he was talking and walking as a neonatal baby, he's allowed to do and say whatever he likes. He's no longer a mortal man. He walks among us as a god. And now the rules are out the window.
I think there's did we lose Dan?
Oh, Dan is gone. Jesus
Dan is gone.
Christ.
It's all right. He'll come back on. Okay. But I think there's some truth to that, and I think that that you're pretty close to it. The only thing is that that our boy Kim Jong Il actually didn't succeed his dad at an early age.
He did not. Okay.
Did not, right? So you got to think that the older Kim he died, let's see, 94. I think he was in his 80s.
Yeah.
Right. And that would, yeah, that would put the younger Kim Jong Il in his mid 50s when he took over.
Okay. So
yeah.
Yes,
So
all right.
So I think you're spot on, though. I think that there's a lot to be said about how they needed to build up his myth, but I think that there's also a lot to be said about him as a person. I think that if we look at drop off log back in. Sorry, guys. So I think people I think part of this was that he really needed to get his own thing going, and he needed to prove to the world that he was like this, and also maybe like when your dad is a revolutionary that created a country, you have a little bit of a you have a bit some issues that go along with that. And then you also mentioned that he is 5'3".
Well, that's what Wikipedia says. I'm actually gonna probably agree with that. If you look at pictures of him, he does not stand over many men, and and that's him in heels, right? And so while we can purport to say that there's a lot of we can say that there's a lot of negative propaganda out there, specifically about Kim Jong Il. I think Kim Il Sung, we were always just like, nah, but Kim Jong Il really stuck in our craw. Like we just did not like him, and there's a lot of negative stuff that is said about him that may or may not be true. But we can definitely say that he was 5'4". 5'4", right? Or 5'3". I can't believe this. I'm mixing them up too.
5'3". Yeah. So he was 5'3".
But Granddad was 5'9". So
there you go, right?
Wow.
So already, oh God, you can look at this, and we'll get into this in just a second. But he is actually he's a theater kid. He is a theater kid, and I wanted to jump into this right away, but he was into the arts, and he was into architecture, and he was into opera, and he was into stuff that is not the revolutionary nation building father that you have. And so you're constantly feeling he's got more to prove than I think anybody else.
Yeah.
And so I think we got Dan back.
Yay!
Yay, there he is. There he is. So Dan, we were just still talking about how how it's possible that there's just an inferiority complex at play with Kim Jong Il, because his dad is the founder of the country, because his dad was 5'9" and he's 5'3", right? Because of all of these different things, more stories and more things have to be made up about him than of his dad. Mm-hmm. His dad actually led that life, whereas he basically reaped the benefits of it, just like we reap the benefits of our parents' work, and then suddenly we're all theater kids and we're all going to study all of these different things, right? And so, and I'm telling you,
are listening to this podcast now.
Sorry.
No, my folks have gotten hooked on this podcast now, so
that's nice.
It all out. Raised your daughter to be a brain surgeon, and she's a theater kid.
Yeah, I mean, and raise your child to be leader of the country, and he's a theater kid. That creative instinct cannot be easily thwarted.
No, sir.
And the truth is,
say it again.
So, but here's the thing, right? Here we are. But here's the thing: the only thing that can thwart that creative instinct is the roadblocks that life itself kind of puts in place. And imagine, here's a person who has none of those roadblocks, right? He has all of these creative instincts, and he has none of the roadblocks and all of the assets of an entire country at play. And suddenly you kind of start getting an insight into what might be awaiting us and why North Korea, why all of us suddenly became super obsessed with North Korea, because we were not obsessed with North Korea while Kim Il-sung was in, but we were obsessed with Korea with Kim Jong Il, and now we're still obsessed with North Korea, right? And I think a lot
Agreed.
to do with the razzle dazzle of Kim Jong Il. So a couple of things that are important also. Oh, and among the things that we were talking about, like he learned to walk at age 3. He was walking at 8 weeks. Allegedly, according to certain sources, he threw his brother into a pool and his brother died. There's questions as to whether that's real or not, but that's also gonna kind of mess you up a little bit. But I think, you know, his childhood is the typical childhood of the son of a dictator, right? Like privilege. But what's interesting is that in Kim Il-sung University, when he went to university, he allegedly wrote 1,500 books over a period of 3 years.
Jesus Christ. Talk about a theater kid. Who lies about stuff like that? Even Shakespeare couldn't do that.
Right. And then among his writings were 6 full operas.
I'm not mad. I'm not mad at that.
Well, exactly. Right. So again, like Kim Il-sung, Stalin, Mao, Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, even later on, right? Like let's go down the list of communist leaders and how many of them actually wrote operas. None.
I don't think any.
I'm waiting on you to fill me in on that.
Yeah, no, I don't think any, right?
Oh no.
And here we have him writing like 6 operas. And so you just kind of get this feeling that he's got other interests. And maybe like revolution isn't one of them, right? And sorry, that was the beginning. I think let's listen to one of these.
Okay, let's take a moment.
I think so. The name of this opera is called Sea of Blood, and it's here we go. You can find it on. Let's see. Is it? Sorry, guys. Man, it's not been a good day for our tech. Here we go. Sea of Blood. Here we go. So I'm just gonna drop it at a random spot that looks exciting here. Of Sea of Blood.
The Barber of Fleet Street.
There we go. I mean, that's real, right? That's gorgeous. That's a real opera.
I'm sorry. This is gorgeous. Hell yeah!
So yeah. So I mean,
it's been a while since I've been to an opera. I would not yell "hell yeah" in the audience. I'm sorry, but I'm for that staging. I love the blocking. I'm for it. I'm excited.
Well, it's Les Mis, right? Like it's revolutionary opera, and it's super dramatic. And I think that if we can like say anything about North Korea during the rule of Kim Jong Il, is that it is super dramatic. And so. What's interesting is that, so he graduates from school, 1,500 books over a period of 3 years, 6 full operas. And according to his official biography, his operas are better than any in the history of music.
Well, it's probably true.
I do have to say that, like, I mean, it's not terrible.
No, it's not. There's no reason it couldn't compete.
I mean,
but to say best, the hyperbole is painful.
Yeah, Dan, you have an opinion there?
There it is. It's cooking. I see
I'd love to meet the person that probably did write that.
Dreading that comment. I was like, nobody got credit for everything they did to help these.
No,
poor
that
people.
person's gone probably.
That person's underneath the jail somewhere.
Yeah.
And
I agree with Dan. Somebody's
yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to fathom. And I think that you know what? We'll get into this again later, but oh my God, you guys. So he wrote a bunch of operas, and here we have like someone who's being groomed to be a leader. That's also has like a real flair for the dramatic. And in 1966, he joined the propaganda and agitation department, and then also became the director of the motion picture and arts division. Right. So you can already see like 1966, he's in his late 20s, early 30s. He can have any job on the planet. And now we lost Brass. Boy, it's been a good one.
Yeah.
Anyway, oh, there she is. All right, hang on, guys, because we cannot not have Brass here.
I would love to know more about the family dynamics between Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong Il.
Right.
Because I'm sure that was a very tense relationship.
I'm here. I made it.
Yeah. Can you see us?
Yes, I see everybody in here.
Okay. So what we were just saying is that the family dynamic for the Kims must have been tense, but I don't think it was. Because the dad keeps bumping his kid upward, right?
Right.
In 1966, he's head of propaganda, and he's like, but I want to make movies. And he's like, okay, you can make propaganda, and that includes movies. So he makes himself the head of the propaganda and agitation department, and then the head of the motion pictures and arts division. And he's such a film buff, right? If there's anything that everyone always, and that's the thing, right? Details about their lives are hard to come by. And so when you're reading up on these biographies, you're basically coming across variations of the exact same pieces of information. But one of the things that they talk about, that everybody talks about, here's Kim Jong Il on the art of opera, right? One of the books he wrote on the art of opera. Mm-hmm. Like standard reading for anybody who wants to study the arts in North Korea. And then here's his other one. And this book is actually I would say it's more famous than the opera one, and it's On the Art of Cinema by Kim Jong Il. And here's something amazing about Kim Jong Il is that you can find his movies and you can find like his works all over the place. So one of the things that he did is in the 70s. He was basically super frustrated. He'd collect movies. He had thousands of VHS and films, like thousands of movies in his collection, and he'd get frustrated because he'd see what was produced in the West. Mm-hmm. And then look at what he was producing or what was being produced in North Korea. And he's like, why can't my movies look like that? Right. And I think like, I know from a personal perspective, I get like, I'm just like, damn it, I'm just not good at this is what when I see somebody who does something like much better than I do, I don't say, oh, well, it's the people around me's fault. I say, right. I'm probably not as good as that. I should practice more. I should do more. But he was getting frustrated with like how his films looked in the 70s. And so his diagnosis, the way that he saw it was that it was a lack of enthusiasm from his actors and his crew.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no.
so I'm going to read this to you guys. His
Oh,
difference, he suggested, was that the North Korean film industry people knew that the state would feed them even if they performed only minimally. So they didn't try very hard.
Oh my
Because they
God.
have to earn money, Kim said. Southern movie industry people expended blood, sweat, and tears to get results. So in the late 70s, early 80s, he needed fresh and passionate voices that would advance North Korean cinema. And so he thought, man, if we only show Western movies, and which are the good stuff, then only bad things will come out of it. We need better movies. We must advance the technology in North Korea, right? Very, very Juche, not Juche, Juche.
No, Juche. Okay.
Juche. Yeah, I found that out while we were in between breaks.
Correct pronunciation. Yeah.
Yeah, correct pronunciation is Juche. And so that's very Juche, right? Like we have to be reliant in how we make movies. But so then he did something kind of crazy. Dan, you want to talk about what he did to make North Korean movies better?
If I'm not mistaken, didn't he go on a kidnapping spree of actresses?
Wow. Is
Yeah.
that really it?
Yeah.
Oh shit, guys.
He would kidnap like South Korean actresses, and didn't he kidnap some Japanese actresses? And
Yeah, and a very famous South Korean director. So the story behind the director goes that he kidnapped him, imprisoned him. The director says that that in prison he lived off of a diet of rice and grass, right? And there are a lot of stories, because North Korea, what you got to remember about North Korea is that farmland is very, very scarce. And so if anything affects that scarce farmland, there's a famine. So North Korea is like famine land, right? Just constant scarcity of food there, unless it's being shipped in from other places. Basically this director, who I can't remember his name right off the top of my head here, but I'm sure we can look it up. But basically, he was held prisoner for a couple of years, and then he got brought in, and he started having conversations with Kim Jong Il, and they became kind of friends, sort of as friends as you can be with somebody who's keeping you, in prison, and
he's a Stockholm friend.
Basically, yeah, he's
right.
a Stockholm friend. And then what ends up happening is he basically helps him make his opus, right? Like his a big movie, and we'll get into that one in just a second. That's Pulgasari. And that is the North Korean Godzilla right here, which is an amazing watch, and I highly recommend anybody who's at all interested in North Korea to watch it. Not because it's like thrilling effects, but because it's an allegory for capitalism through a socialist Juche point of view.
Wow.
And so basically, I'll spoil the plot for everybody.
Oh,
I know.
exclusive.
It's spoiler alert. So the monster, it grows, right, and it helps the peasants overthrow the evil king. Right, very classic, like good. That's a good communist story. The peasants overthrow the king. Juche comes into play. The monster requires too much food to feed, becomes a burden on the peasants. The peasants kill the monster. Right.
Okay.
So it's not enough to just kill the forces of oppression. You have to kill whatever you're dependent on to reach full freedom.
Wow.
Right?
Gosh.
Yeah. Literally, Pulgasari the only movie that accomplished that came out of North Korea. All of the other ones are kind of messy and difficult to follow. I will say, like, one amazing thing about Pulgasari is that it has 10,000 extras in it.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
Cecil B. DeMille stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Cecil B. DeMille had 10,000 extras.
No.
And then you look at some of the scenes here with 10,000 extras and like bales of fiery hay being rolled down a hill, and you're just kind of like, I don't think he's acting that he's on fire, right? Like there's definitely like several moments in the movie where you're just like, oh, he's hurt, right?
Yeah.
You can see some guy in the background, and you're just like, oh dear. And then in addition to that, there's definitely like animals were harmed during the making of that movie.
Right.
Like
100%. Yeah. 100%.
I believe there's a scene where they kill and eat a horse. And it does. I don't think they were pretending to do that.
No, they were probably very excited to kill a horse.
Right, to kill and eat a horse. Yeah, and so he does he takes, he kidnaps these people. He's growing kind of his opera. He's definitely working on the image of his dad. All of sort of this hyper intense like adulation stuff comes around. But then here's an interesting like tidbit that I think that adds to the whole notion of trying to live up to dad's trying to fill dad's shoes. And this is the flower Kim Jong Il. Now, as you guys remember, Kim Il Sung was a flower that was given from one revolutionary to another.
That was an orchid, specifically. An orchid.
Yeah. This flower, Kim Jong Il, grown in North Korea. I mean, the story goes that Kim Jong Il like created it, but like, oh, I also have a flower is kind of what it feels like. It doesn't feel like this is like a natural progression of things. It feels like there's definitely like a little bit of forcing the hand of fate and trying to live up to something that you're having a difficult time with, when really your passion is making movies through kidnapping and the death of extras. So if that's your passion, I say follow it, and don't try to run a country, because it's just not gonna. It's your head's not gonna be in it. And I'm gonna venture to ask this group of theater kids in just a second. What would you say if one of us ran a country? What would probably be the worst? What would be the worst thing about a country that you ran? Like, what is your weakest spot? The spot that if you alone were responsible for a country, what do you think is just like, you'd probably mishandle this part really, really badly? Amanda, what's your answer there?
I already know this, and I'm embarrassed to say it because it's just the way that I've been handling my entire life. Is I don't have a very good poker face at all. And when I don't like something and I'm looking at you, I cannot control the muscles of my face enough to get through the scene.
Right.
You're going to know immediately I don't like it. And then I create more problems by not just playing along.
So diplomacy is not your strong point.
I mean, look, I want people to tell the truth, and I want, people to be safe, and I want to, hold back information that is harmful and use that when it's good. But if someone were to pull my hand and shake it really hard like Trump does to other world leaders, we were going to be both on the ground. I'm going to do some jujitsu. I don't play nice. Like, if you embarrass me in front of people, I'm going to take you down like a gazelle.
Yeah.
But I'm the asshole,
Right.
So already my country's going to be in a PR fit because I don't smile for the camera if something janky's going on. You're going to see it all over my face, my entire body.
For Kim Jong Il is that he has a country that bends to everything he needs, right?
Yeah.
And so his shortcomings in something like that would be relatively easy to hide because you control the media, and all of that. So I think like he's kind of got a get out of jail free card when it comes to like not being able to have a poker face. Also, not very good at taking direction, right? He was the director, right? Not very good and cooperative. When his movies weren't good, he didn't think, well, maybe I'm not a very good director, or maybe there's something going on here. He was immediately like, the incentive of my cast and crew is what's the problem here, right? Yeah. So definitely some issues with leadership style. What about you, Dan? What would your biggest weak spot be if you had absolute control of a country?
I've thought about this several times, and if I was in absolute control of a country, it would be perfect. There would be no problems.
Okay.
The only issues would be the incentives for people working around me not working hard enough.
Got it.
But I want to talk. I think we've seen when like entertainment theater type people get in these positions, right?
Have we seen that? That's amazing.
Yeah, Ronald Reagan.
Well, Ronald Reagan, and I'm sorry, I'm even going to say Trump. Like it doesn't. Two different skill sets.
Yeah, it really is.
Translate. It does not translate very well.
No.
Right? And like it's just.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like we kind of fell for the Ronald Reagan thing a little bit more than we should have, because if you really look at the Reagan era, like it was a lot of razzle dazzle. And you think about Kim Jong Il, he was Reagan era, right? He was in the 80s. So there's a lot of razzle dazzle diplomacy going on, whereas the previous generation was more about like we got you through the war, we did we did this kind of stuff. Like that generation was just like, let me show you like how successful we are. And so I think for me, like my biggest shortcoming is just I decided to do art, and I decided to do entertainment, and I'm into like literature and writing because I am so abysmally bad at math and numbers that like economy and economics, like I glaze over when I almost fell asleep just saying those two words. Like here, because like, and I have books. I have a book where it's like one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish on economics, because that's literally the only way that I'm looking for it right now. I can't find it, but literally, like, it's the only way that I could like read a book about economics and not just be just like, oh my God, right? Like, give me a story arc. And I think that when you're looking at the time that Kim Jong Il came into power, and the global situation for communist countries at that given point, you're looking at the dissolution of the Soviet Union, 91, 92. And at that point in time, like, the transfer of power from Kim Il-sung to Kim Jong Il had already begun. And so you're looking at your primary source of trade, your primary source of income and support and aid is falling apart. And really what you want to be doing is naming flowers after yourself, right? So let me go into some of this, some of the stuff that was happening here. Because I feel like things just happened, boom, 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 and we jumped ahead to Pulgasari, and the kidnappings, right? But in 1980 is when like the economy starts kind of getting a herky jerky. 1987, it almost collapses after the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 91. By the time of the so that's the economy. And you look at the rise of Kim Jong Il, it's almost in tune with with the decline, the collapse, and then the dissolution of the Soviet Union. like 80s, 87, 91, like all of those are big years in the North Korean economy, and all of those are big years in the history of the Soviet Union, and those are all big personal years for Kim Jong Il, right? He's basically getting handed a shit sandwich. So
Right.
so in 1980, he basically assumes de facto-ish power. He's given senior posts in the Presidium, in the Military Commission, in the party secretariat. This is where he becomes dear leader, right? So father Kim Il-sung is beloved leader. Kim Jong Il is dear leader. The government begins like the whole idea of a cult of personality starts building around him because they know they have to build him up, right? And so this is when Kim Jong Il is referred to as fearless leader, the great successor to the revolutionary cause, and he's basically second in command by 1985 when Pulgasari comes out as the leader. So 91, he's made the supreme commander of the People's Army. Now, you guys got to realize, like, this is 90, 91. His dad died in 94, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking like the chain of events that are about to go down just go boom, 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 right? So we have here what we see as a frustrated artist, and we know how poorly frustrated artists fare in positions of leadership.
I sure do.
Right? Like there's a very famous, very evil painter who just wasn't very good, who then took out those frustrations on a lot of people.
That's right.
So in 92, so we're talking, he's going to assume power in 94. And in 92, they're doing radio broadcasts where they're talking about him as dear father, dear leader. Now, just think about this. This is in 92 is his 50th birthday. This is a 50-year-old man. So he was in his 40s when he did the abduction. He was basically my age when he's just like, you know what would be a good idea to make my movies better is abduct people, right? So he wrote his real big operas in college. So right now we're talking about a period where he is feeling super expressive, and one of the big things about Kim Jong Il that people talk about is how he would involve himself in sort of the minutia of the lives of North Koreans, and kind of have a difficult time with the big picture, right? He's like, no, move it there, right? Like stuff like he was deeply into like the architecture of North Korea and wanted to make sure that he dictated like the size of people's houses that worked in the North Korean government, right? I mean, just amazing stuff that you kind of think like, why involve yourself in that? Why not just say, hey, you do this, right? And this is the Juche Tower in Pyongyang. It's basically the Washington Monument of Pyongyang. It's about the same height. It's basically the national penis, right? We have a national penis.
Right.
Trafalgar Square has its national penis. This is the North Korean national penis. And I think, and he had a big hand in the design and architecture of that, as he did in much design and architecture. That is stuff that can be documented. His role in other parts of government and military decisions, all of those things are a little bit more haphazard than the direct involvement that he had in filmmaking, in the cultural development of the country, in all sorts of different artistic endeavors, right? And
right.
So we're in a situation here where the country needs you, and you spent the majority of your adult life writing opera, making movies, making like Godzilla.
And that's the thing. I mean, and you're talking about this and all of this. I think he probably viewed the country as the best canvas he could possibly have, right?
Sure.
Like using the people and the country to create art, right? It was like his biggest production ever will be North Korea.
Governance,
Not important.
tedious, thankless, boring work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It
Right.
requires listening to a lot of people
Yeah.
and then making a decision based on that information.
Right.
If
And it
there's
requires you taking advice from people who know more than you do.
precisely.
Governments require that. That's sewn into a government. That's why
Yeah.
there's an envelope for presidents in that drawer that says "Open this when on your first day in here,"
Yeah.
or whatever that.
And that's I think, that's something that the current administration in the U.S. has had trouble with, right? They have done daily briefings. The president has come out in front of us and said a lot of things, but the reality is that there has not been a national strategy around coronavirus.
Right. It's because that's hard and boring.
Yeah,
it's not a production.
Exactly. It's hard. It's boring. Like you have to take the advice of people who are nerds and who talk about like doctor stuff and you kind of understand that. And a lot of people say that you're really good at it. But the truth is that like you have to understand how to take in information and put it out there and make it effective. And if your passion isn't that, if your passion isn't like the interpretation, dissemination, and practical application of information in order to advance both your country's needs and your needs, then you're not a good leader on the national stage. And so I believe that early Kim Jong Il had an issue with this and had difficulty with it, and that's not to say that that there weren't like there we're about to get to something like super important as soon as Dad dies. So let's actually keep this going. But there's some important things to know. So on December of 1991, he's supreme commander of the People's Army, right? So here he is, like he's in his 50th birthday. In 92 is when they start calling him Dear Father, right? Like the transition is there, and who knows what health scare Kim Il Sung must have had to have that happen. But like 91, we've got 3 years left in Kim Il Sung's life. And it seems that everybody knows it. So they're already starting the severe transfer of power to the whole thing. Kim Il Sung in 92 publicly states that his son was in charge of internal affairs. So by 92, transition of power is de facto. In 92, radio broadcasts start referring to Kim Jong Il as Dear Father instead of Dear Leader. Which means kind of like a promotion. Then on his 50th birthday, massive celebrations. And just so you guys know, there's like an exact timing. His 50th birthday and his 80th birthday of Kim Il Sung, same years. And that's the reasoning behind the manipulation of numbers, allegedly. Is so that they'll coincide of the years of birth is so that they'll coincide with each other by like a nice round number, and we'll see that occur again with the official history of Kim Jong Un. So in 92, big year, de facto leader. Guess what? It's the year that Kim Jong Il makes his first public speech.
Wow.
Yeah.
So 50 years old and been grooming to take over and has yet to address the public.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all for creating mystique, but I feel like this guy doesn't want this job.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't say no, right? And I don't think he knew that he didn't want this job because he has no choice. Right. It's like the heir to a throne saying, I don't want this. An entire country is depending on you. It's not what you want. You do this and you're going to do the best that you can at it. Right. But I just it's almost crazy that his first public speech during a military his first public speech was in '92 when he was 50, and it was very, very short. And he said, "Glory to the officers and soldiers of the heroic Korean People's Army," followed by loud applause and at Pyongyang Square. Like literally, not a great start. Obviously, not feeling comfortable in his shoes. But here he is, 2 years away from assuming complete control, if frankly he didn't already. And here we are in a place where he's delivering his first speech. He's frustrated at his art, and and there's a cult of personality that is making him larger than life. It's a lot of trouble that's about to go down. So 94, 92. So a couple of things about his style of leadership. He was personally directed even minor details of state affairs, such as the size of houses for party secretaries and the delivery of gifts to his subordinates.
Okay.
So I run a company of 9 people. I am the party leader of my company, and I very often tell someone else to buy something nice for someone else, right?
Yeah.
Like, to keep my team happy. Like I'm just like, hey, can you buy them something cool? Here's a couple of ideas, and that's it, right? But for somebody that's running a country to be involved in those kind of minute details means that they're not involved in the running of the country. And when Donald Trump is talking about running about the details of a parade, right? That means he's not paying attention to something else.
Right.
And I think that there's a lot of similarities that we can see about the failings of somebody who may not be up to the task, taking over leadership of a country and the kind of effects that it can have.
Yeah.
Especially when in Kim Jong Il's case, you get handed a shit sandwich with economic collapse, famine, and the basic collapse of your biggest ally. So he's it's kind of in a wild place. In 93, just think about this. 1 year before Dad dies, he's already the de facto leader. And what does Kim Jong Il put out? He puts out.
Oh.
Yep. The work Theory of Circus, published on June 29th of 1993.
Theory of Circus.
Animals were definitely harmed in the making of this show.
Oh, for sure.
He wasn't just a theater kid. He was like the theater kid that's like into mime and circus and trapeze.
Yeah.
Like the super out there stuff.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you guys, like I'm into circus, right? Like I look at like I watched the Ken Burns documentary about the circus, and I loved it. I'm just like, yeah, Barnum and Bailey, blah, right? Like I grew up on.
You really do like circuses.
I love the circus. I love magic, right? Like I can't get into mime, but like I said, like, look, I'm dressed like this because I see a lot of myself in a lot of these things, right? And as you're about to assume ownership of a country, you know, your dad is on his deathbed. I'm just like, I'm going to write a book about the circus, right? And here it is. And because you're in charge of the country, it becomes like reading, and the circus becomes an important art form, and it becomes something that your country is proud of. But you've got other things to be worrying about than dancing bears, right? And so it's just kind of an interesting relation to his frame of mind, as to where his what was going on, and what right before he assumed power. Here he is in charge of the military, and he's writing a book about circus. And I'm sure that North Korean government officials could make the argument that that the circus was that he's a Renaissance man with many skills and abilities, and he was able to handle things on his own. But to me, writing something about the circus at a time of national crisis, of economic instability, and of leadership transfer, to me speaks of someone who doesn't have his head in the game and might have been ill prepared for what was going to come. And what finally came was what came, right? That's the hearse and the funeral for Kim Jong Il. I mean Kim Il Sung. Good grief, Kim Il Sung. And so Dad dies, and you better hope your stuff is tight, right? And I think that one of the important things around the death of that leader, dear leader or beloved leader, I can't remember. Great leader,
beloved leader.
No, Jong Il is beloved, isn't he? Well, now I know
he's dear leader.
Dear, yeah, I think dear leader is Il Sung. So one of the things around this is that there is a great deal of mourning. There's a great deal of sadness, and I think that this is a moment where the death of Kim Il Sung is really a moment where many Americans in 1994, many Americans were introduced to North Korea in a cultural way, and a lot of that has to do with this, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's I think an unfortunate way of being introduced to it, and an unfortunate way of us kind of coming into contact with just what did Kim Jong Il mean to the North Koreans? How did they express that? And also, it was an introduction to the stagecraft of Kim Jong Il, right? So Kim Il Sung meant a lot to the people. There was a genuine outpouring of grief for the man who liberated them from the Japanese, brought them out of the Korean War, the catastrophic and destructive Korean War, into a time of prosperity. And from a psychological standpoint, I think for a lot of the North Korean people, you can definitely picture that this was a moment of it was in the end of an era in more ways than one. For 2 years, his son had already been assuming leadership, and also they were already in a steep and destructive economic decline. There had been numerous famines, and as we know, like, they're prone to famine because so little of their land is good for growing crops, and so you had the death of the general here, and I think it just struck them hard. It was a genuine outpouring of grief, and there's a lot of questions because we mourn differently than others. There's a lot of questions as to whether or not that was real. Like, are we seeing something real? Because it was so over the top. And I'm gonna play this little snippet here from the funeral. It's hard to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to watch. And the question all over the West and here in the US, the question was is that real, or is it show?
Right.
And I think that question is at the crux of our approach to North Korea from this point forward. From
Right.
this point forward, nobody knows if it's real or if it's show.
It's probably somewhere in the middle.
Exactly. And didn't we discuss that about history? That history is always, it's probably a little bit of both. And I'm going to say, like, I think that what I explained about the role of Kim Il Sung in North Korea, and what he did was is super important. And then we also have to accept the fact that there is that stagecraft for his successor was important. After this, Kim Jong Il declared a 4-year period of mourning where everybody was kind of on lockdown, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, Dan, you spoke to this last week, but you said that's the moment of emergency where you're trying to figure out what you're doing. So you declare martial law, right? It's under the guise of something else, but really it's you just trying to get your stuff together. And we're looking here at like the emotional toll, the difficult realities for folks, and in addition to this transfer of power to someone who is 5'3", not 5'9", and has like weird glasses and kind of poofy hair and dresses super eccentrically. He's not wearing the kind of flowing trench coat and visionary style of his dad. He's got his own kind of 70s vibe going.
Well, and I mean, you know, his dad was sort of a handsome man, right? And
comparatively speaking,
just this exactly, and he's just this little guy and
and
big
and you know, and not just that, but corpulence is also kind of a family tradition, right? Kim Il Sung wasn't entirely fit, really, like he wasn't thin,
right?
And Kim Jong Il isn't either.
They're a big family.
Yeah, they are. And listen, like no room to talk here, nor do I cry corpulence anyway. But it is something to note when you're trying to talk about the sense of self of leadership, and what you're trying to project versus what you are internally in your mind, right? Like there's a lot of different things going on. And I think this image is great. I think this is an idealized image of Kim Jong Il. And my guess is that he went through all of these and approved these. And I like this one the most of the ones that are of him out there, because I think that it speaks to the things that he had a hand in. And I think he had a hand in the translation of the Juche ideal into a cultural language. I think that was super important, and we're going to go into some achievements, because I think we've done enough railing on potential fears and shortcomings and theater kid stuff, and there's stuff to be said about how you're dealing with the shit sandwich you've been handed. So in the middle of this sort of nightmare scenario that his dad died, famine, like hardcore famines, people eating mud to fill their stomach.
Yeah,
right.
It was one of the worst famines, certainly of the 20th century.
Yeah,
the mid 90s famine.
Yeah, people just fleeing North Korea because they have no choice because they're starving. And in addition to that, you're trying to consolidate your power, and your neighbors, your support system has collapsed. You have to figure out a way in your theater kid head how to rescue your country from this moment, because not only is it all of those things, but you have to remember that communism and communist countries, part of the internal culture is military readiness against the potential and military might. And I feel like you think about China now and how like they still do that, but they're more confident in it than say other countries might have been at some point. But North Korea part of the, and we talked about this, part of the fear is that the US might still attack at any given moment. And the US has done nothing to try and calm those fears. They hold armed military exercises every year in Korea with the South Korean government to flex on the North Koreans and show them just how they better not act up. And so the idea of a threat of war is a cultural linchpin for North Koreans, and B, a reality, right? And so you're faced with the destruction of your country basically through economic issues. And let me just read you guys like a little bit of the economic issues so that we understand the answer to that. So this is from a Kim biography. Kim had a, quote, reputation for being almost comically incompetent in matters of economic management.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, comically incompetent in matters of economic management. Like, you could basically, comically incompetent means that if you make a decision, it's almost hilariously how bad that decision has been made. It's laughable how poor that decision is. So the economy of North Korea is a disaster in the 90s. There was severe floods in the mid 90s, poor land management, 18% arable land, right? What we were talking about. And you just can't get goods anymore because your allies have basically fallen apart. And so you've got a mid 90s, you've got a severe famine. And there were like little things that he tried to do to deal with it, but what can you do with that kind of devastation, right? Like, you're not equipped mentally, nor is your country equipped to deal with something like that. And so they did like little things, like they devalued the North Korean won, and it had such a well, that's later in the 2000s, but I mean, just bad news, right? And so in order to step away from that, Kim doubles down on something that he's familiar with. Kim Jong Il doubles down on the military, and he instills a policy called Songun. And Songun is also what made the US freak out about North Korea. So here you have a wounded country on the verge of collapse, according to Western eyes, in the middle of a clumsy transition. They're doing really wild cultural things. And Kim Jong Il's like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to do Songun, which is military first. We're going to enlarge our military and make sure that everybody in the military, at the very least, is taken care of. It becomes the supreme repository of power, and it makes the military basically the largest part of the Korean economy, which has a bit of a trickle-down effect. It's basically a way of protecting more people. Because
I think,
go ahead.
Part of the problem that they've gotten themselves into is with the how do you say it? Juche?
Juche.
Right. With that thing, now this whole mythology you've built doesn't work. Like, you can't build this self-reliance and then you're in this state, whereas they probably could have warmed to some of the Western nations or gone to try to get better help from China, but then that destroys the whole mythology you've built. Right.
It was, so Juche was definitely like a little bit of a self-defeating situation.
Right.
And so but honestly, like, was Juche as an ideology formed out of it was formed out of necessity, right? And so that's the question. Like, if my identity is a theater kid and I give up on theater, as I eventually did, then that's a problem, because then suddenly I find myself with no identity. But if I'm a well-rounded person with a variety of interests and a knowledge of how I can evolve as a human, then if I decide to stop doing theater, it's okay. I continue as a person and I evolve and I can find other things that I can do. The country of North Korea made its ideology and its national identity around isolation, and that will come home to roost at some point. And it did. And isolation, isolation isn't good for human beings, and it's not good for nation states, as we learned from Wallachia, right? From Dracula and like that kind of isolation only leads to like misunderstandings and vilification. And it's not until you open up a little bit that folks are gonna that things are gonna get better for you or for the people around you.
Right.
So Songun is basically the shift in policies from '94 to basically into the early 2000s, and within that scope, then with the eternal fear of invasion, with sort of the ostracizing, this is where the hermit kingdom sort of language comes in. People are kind of freaked out about North Korea. There are several incidents of international terrorism, right? And we know that Kim Jong Il kidnapped actresses. There were other people who were kidnapped. There was a flight that was blown up with a bunch of South Korean people. That could be traced back to North Korea. There was just a bunch of like small pieces of domestic terrorism that might I add, that's and I know like small pieces of international terrorism, not domestic terrorism, small pieces of international terrorism. And I think that's also where when George W. Bush talked about the axis of evil and the axis of terrorism, I think that during the time of Kim Jong Il, they supported certain terrorist groups in order to make up for the fact that their external military and their external intelligence was a little bit at a disadvantage. So they worked those things to their advantage, and certainly it did nothing to help the North Korean people as all of these kind of things kept going. And then you also see the development of the nuclear program, and that's what freaked everybody from Bill Clinton all the way up to Donald Trump out, right? Is that they started building, and we know at this point now they have built a nuclear program with nuclear weapons, and they're hydrogen bombs. It's not anything, it's nothing super advanced, but they're definitely weapons of mass destruction in the hands of what we see as a somewhat volatile place. And I think we can all agree here that theater kids should never have access to nuclear weapons.
No.
So we're in the early 2000s, and what's really sad is that the doesn't make it much past the early 2000s. But let's just keep going. 2002, they tried to do something. In 2009, they tried. Kim says that they're gonna devalue the North Korean won in order to make it better for the country, and that crashes their economy even further. So we're talking about 2009 here, not that long ago, and Kim Jong Il is already is still making a mess of the country. They're putting out some amazing propaganda, right? But at that point in time, things are a little bit of a mess. So this is where the personal kind of issues that Kim Jong Il might have had come into play. He was diabetic. It said that he suffered from epilepsy. Wow, I almost just had epilepsy just now. Saying that he suffered from epilepsy. There's rumors of a variety of strokes during the entirety of his life, and he was also a big drinker of Hennessy. And do you guys know the story of him?
I know about Hennessy. Yeah.
Yeah, you wanna tell us what
No,
that's
no,
all
no.
about?
I'm way more interested in what you know about it. I just know that
Dan, do you
Hennessy
know
was
what
his
the deal is?
choice.
No,
All
I'm
right.
interested in hearing this.
So he personally, and I'm sure he didn't drink it himself, right? But he was so enamored with Hennessy that he became, I think, the third largest importer of Hennessy cognac in the world.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was known to have like tastes. Like he loved certain things, and I want to say he ate like he was into like he was afraid of flying, so he wouldn't fly anywhere. So when he did state visits to his dad was also afraid of flying. So when he did state visits to China and to Russia, those were all on train, and it was a very indulgent train. And I think one of his favorite foods was donkey meat, which is just kind of an odd. I mean, I don't know what that translates to. I don't know. Like I know that maybe that's being highlighted in Western countries because donkeys are like stupid ass eats ass meat, right? Or is it that he actually liked donkey meat? I suppose we may never know. But by 2008, he had already had a stroke. And a second stroke by 2008.
Jeez.
And yeah, and we think about how he was a hard drinker. He liked to party. He liked his actresses. He had a variety of wives and mistresses. He had a variety of kids from a variety of people, from a variety of women. And the line of succession wasn't super clear, right? His eldest son wasn't into it, and all of his kids were educated in Switzerland, by the way.
Wow.
In private schools in Switzerland. And so
How does that fit in with the Juche attitude?
I don't think the people in North Korea knew that's what they did, and they always bring them back for college.
Yeah.
They go to elementary, middle, high school in Switzerland, and then they bring them back for college. And Kim Jong-un went to college at Kim Il-sung University in North Korea, and he studied physics. But we'll get into it in just a second. And so he's hard partier, has just kind of this weird propensity for violence, a little bit of a volatility that's difficult to understand. And so in 2008, he suffers a second stroke. 2009, they show him visiting factories, and he's okay. Really, he's okay. But then by 2010, everyone's freaking out because the line of succession isn't obvious, and there's a variety of people that are not in the Kim family that are also well situated at this point to possibly take over leadership. And I think that this is a good moment to acknowledge that the style of leadership of Kim Jong Il is different than the style of leadership from Kim Il Sung. Kim Il Sung kept people around him, would ask their advice, and would make decisions based on all of the information. Kim Jong Il was a from the gut person. Do we know anybody else who really goes from the gut and doesn't listen to the people around him? Donald Trump goes from the gut and doesn't listen to people. And I've worked for people who are in a position of leadership, who go from the gut and inevitably always make the worst decisions because from their gut in particular. Like if someone who's relatively well read and intelligent does something from the gut, it comes from a basis of information, right?
Yeah.
But if you do something from the gut and your interest hasn't been expansive, you're not likely to make good decisions, right? And so Kim Jong-il wouldn't take advice from people and would just demand that people do what he said. And if you did anything, you better hope it was in line with something that he liked. Otherwise, right? And that's something that's That's a reality in North Korea. North Korea has a history of human rights abuses. It suppresses free speech. And my wife kind of is just like, please don't sound like a North Korean apologist. I don't want any political kickback off of that. And I know that a lot of when we're talking about the ebbs and flows of the histories of places, that just understanding why people do something doesn't mean that was the right thing to do, right? And we talk about theater kids being frustrated and not wanting your life to be a certain way, and it ends up being that. That's no excuse for committing acts of terrorism and kidnapping people and rape and murder and human rights abuses, right? So I think that we are the short years, right? Just a little bit over a decade. It was 15 years about of the Kim Jong Il presidency. All of them, basically, all of those years speckled with a downward turn in North Korean prestige and the economy, and a heightening of the personality cult around Kim Jong Il and Kim Il Sung. And here we have somebody who has kept a tight control over his country and doesn't and suddenly doesn't have a plan for. My guess is that plans for the funeral of Kim Jong Il and how he was going to be deified after he died were probably in place before his succession was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is pure speculation.
Yeah.
Pure speculation. And it doesn't, I'm not talking on any basis of knowledge, but I know that somebody who look at the production value on this idealized image of him, right? And it has it has the city that he helped design. It has a structure that he helped design. It has an ideal that he talked about, and it's surrounded by fireworks with him standing in the forefront and with surrounded by flowers. This is somebody who cares about presentation more than he cares about the step-by-step process of leadership. And based on that, I think there's few moments of razzle dazzle more big for a country, bigger than state funerals, right? You have state weddings, you have state funerals, you have coronations, you have transfers of power. Like those are the traditional moments of state dinners. Those are the moments of razzle dazzle for countries. And I think much like our current president, this leader was enamored with those moments more than he was with the ins and outs of leadership. And into that comes his death. And I don't want to, I feel so let me just really quickly talk about how he died and what that was all about. He died of a heart attack, just while traveling by train. That's the widely accepted international version of it. Uh-huh. The North Korean version is that he died in a fit of rage over construction faults at a crucial power plant in Janjang, in a province there in North Korea. And they transferred power to Kim Jong-un. And I can't emphasize enough the difference between Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il, because we're talking about, so now let's the three of us take this moment to just kind of picture what this succession is. Your dad was the Gaddafi of the Korean Peninsula. And I say that because Colonel Gaddafi was flamboyant. He had a cult of personality that he helped cultivate. That cult of personality also involved things that are difficult to accept, right? Like the mythology built around Kim Jong-il became so far-fetched, right? There's a movie about Forever with Kim Jong Il. It was made right after his death by North Korea. I guess he probably had a. You okay there?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
My guess is that he had a hand in making it, but it is replete with moments of adulation and of extraordinary feats. An official telling of how he was in of stories of Kim Jong Il is that he played golf. He played golf in 1994. This is a right 94. Like, just think about that. Same year that he assumed power. He played golf in 94. He played a perfect game, all holes in one. It was witnessed by 17 bodyguards, all who will attest to it. And after playing that perfect game, he became bored with the game and never played it again.
Wow. And
first round of golf, and stories like that are all over official North Korean documents. They're all over this documentary, which I highly recommend anybody who's interested in the subject to see it. It's available on Amazon Prime. So literally, you just have to go on there and Amazon Prime Video, and it's on. Type in Kim Jong Il, and it'll be one of the first titles that comes up. Absolutely view, but Gaddafi did something similar where he had all of these things on top of it, like all of these incredible myths built around him, and people believed it not because they believed it, but also because they had to, right? So you have the state apparatus enforcing that belief system, as well as the backup of, if you say something wrong, you will be jailed, right? Or worse. And you have sort of a dysfunctional moment in time where once that person passes away, you can have two things happen. You can have the continuation of that mythology through the means of the state, or you can have what happened with Gaddafi, which is when he went away, all of it crumbled, and people are like, can you believe he tried to tell us that he golfed the perfect golf game, right? And that's what happened when Gaddafi died. He died, and everybody was just like, oh, thank God we don't have to believe in these things anymore. But this is North Korea. And Gaddafi, for as closed off as he made Libya, wasn't as closed off as Kim Jong Il had made Korea. Sorry, Libya, Korea. And so what happens is, once Kim Jong Il dies, we see a repeat of the sobbing, of the throwing yourselves, of the razzle dazzle funeral of Kim Il Sung, which does a couple of things, right? It's I believe, and again, like, this is just like a belief. I can't verify any of this, but I believe that it was partially done with a wink.
really?
I believe that the state funeral of Kim Jong Il received the same adulation as the one of Kim Il Sung, because from this point forward, that is how North Korea will mourn its leaders.
Right.
Not because people were genuinely sad and falling over themselves. I'm sure there was some of that, but not in the same way that there was from Kim Il Sung.
Yeah.
And I believe that was almost a little bit more widely accepted by the state, that because if you look at the videos that came out not that long ago, right? 2009, 2000, 2009. Oh, no, sorry, 2011 is when he died.
Yeah.
So that's really not that long ago. And so we remember, we have these vivid images of them falling over themselves, and that helps reinforce all of this, like, gosh, they're so weird and they have nukes, we think, right? And here in the US, that's when like during remember, Kim Jong Il was the villain, and he was the villain in Team America during like 9/11 and the axis of evil, and all of those things in the 2000s are happening. So when he dies in 2011 and all of them are falling over themselves to do all of these things, it reinforces our vision of a weird country, whereas for them, it's sort of a progression, and they're establishing national traditions as to what you do with the second leader in your country's history that has passed away.
Right.
Just take hints from what happened previously. And I got to tell you guys, like, I think about the state opening of Parliament in the UK, right?
Right.
You know what Black Rod is, Dan?
Oh yeah, it's
Say it.
It's such a great ceremony. Yeah. So Black Rod is a person, basically sort of a sergeant at arms type thing, and he's stationed in the House of Lords.
Yeah.
And the House of Lords sends him to the House of Commons, and the House of Commons yells, "Bar the doors," and slams the doors shut, slams them in his face.
And
like,
it's just
slams
ceremonial.
them.
It's ceremonial,
ceremonial.
not really.
Yeah.
But it started in a
Right.
real thing where the House of Commons did bar itself one time,
Yeah.
right? And so they slam the door as hard as they can in his face, and he raps on it 3 times with his
Yeah.
black rod,
Yeah.
and he asks for permission to enter, and then he says that the House of Commons is requested by the sovereign, and it comes from the Civil War.
Yeah, that's
Right?
right.
Yeah.
That's right. When Charles the First tried to get them to come in and talk,
Right.
they're like, go eat dirt. Our power comes from God as well, and doesn't descend from the sovereign, right?
Right.
So, but literally, they slammed the door in a person's face as part of the state opening of Parliament every year.
It's fantastic.
It's
and
fantastic. It's amazing.
And they check the basement, right? They check the basement for gunpowder.
That's right. That's right. With candles.
Right.
But again, we're talking about theater kids all over again. Does this not stink of theater kids? All this yelling and running around and slamming sets and
Yeah.
Well, because that's what government is for us.
yeah,
Our parades
I
and
suppose.
fun events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so ultimately, what we saw, and I'm going to show it again because I think it bears. This is still Kim Jong Il. Kim Il Sung's funeral, and we saw a repetition of this. Right, this almost mania of people falling over themselves for Kim Jong Il, as we did for Kim Il Sung, and so here's the question: when you've only had 2 transfers of leadership and they both look the same, is that dramatics? Is it propaganda, or is it establishing national tradition? Right.
Right.
Mm.
We look at it as weird because it's young, but guess what? Like, I am thinking that if and when the same happens to our dear Kim Jong-un, you're going to see the exact same expression of national grief.
This is a North Korean.
It is a North Korean
funeral. Right.
That's it.
It's like we have our own with the president's coffin on the horseback carriage with the boots turned backwards.
Yep. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So again, like, we think of our government and we think of how we accepted these visuals when they came in from North Korea to our TV sets, and there was so much fun made of people crying and those, and it looked like fake tears, and you go, oh, right, and just like beating their chest and crying out to the heavens, and that's exactly the same thing they did last time. And my guess is that's exactly what they'll do again. And my guess is that is how they participate in acknowledging the national mourning. Here, U.S., like, we just all kind of sit at home and watch on TV. And
right.
And it's this ideal of like a communal reaction to it is neither required nor is something that we're accustomed to ourselves. And let me just say something. Our inability to address national moments of crisis and grieving in any form of uniform, any way that's uniform, has messed us up as a country, and we're seeing it right now. We
Perhaps,
can agree to take care of each other. We are all sad and indoors and scared, and we cannot agree that we need to do that for each other. And guess what? North Koreans, they know what they're supposed to do for each other.
Right.
And one of their leaders die. In a moment of national crisis and mourning, they all know how to act. They all know like what we do. They all know the steps to go through, and they all know to just wait and sit and over the next period of time, this new person whose last name was probably going to be Kim is going to be, or whose name has Kim in it, is going to become president. Is going to lead the country. And that's exactly what happened, right? They went through the same steps they had gone a little bit over a decade ago. Everybody knew the steps. Everybody knew they were going to have to do it for this guy too, even though this guy, because that's what was required last time, and it's even more required now because things were a little bit more intense and a little bit more dramatic during this. And I do feel like. Okay, so let me read some stuff about the funeral and succession. It was reported that he died of a heart attack on 2011. He was succeeded by his youngest son, right? So the older son, if you look for pictures of the older son, he looks like a slacker. He looks like the Korean version of what's his name? The Seth Rogen.
Oh my God.
He looks like the Korean version of Seth Rogen. So he jumps on. Kim Jong Un is picked, great successor, according to the Korean Central News Agency. Now, just remember this, in case we're wondering if the mythology around Kim Jong Il stops, it does not. And listen to this description of what happened when he died. According to the North Korean Central News Agency, during his death, a fierce snowstorm paused, and the sky glowed red above the sacred mountain Paektu. Right?
Yeah.
Remember that mountain? And
right.
The ice on the famous lake also cracked so loud that it seemed to shake the heavens and earth. And it's a bummer for me to read that, to be honest, because. It feels like that was the last shake of Kim Jong Il, and he's now like, okay, he's done. This is the last bit of drama. Kim's funeral took place on 28th of December, a mourning period lasting until the following day. South Korea's military was immediately put on alert out of concern that political jockeying in North Korea could destabilize the country. Asian stock markets fell soon after the announcement due to similar concerns. On the 12th, North Korea called Kim Jong Il the eternal leader and pronounced that his body would also be preserved and displayed at the Kumusan Memorial Palace. There's a few things around that. There is a great tradition in communist countries of doing leader one and leader two in display. Like the first and second leaders are the ones that you put in display. Lenin and Stalin were put in display. Mao and Deng Xiaoping were put on display. I think Deng Xiaoping got taken out, and I think Stalin got taken out.
Right. Yes.
That's important, right? Because there's a period when they're like, okay, we're going to put him in, we're going to preserve him, and there's also a period of looking back and going like, we can take out the second guy.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
The only question about whether or not that will happen in North Korea is that the power of Kim Jong Un descends from his lineage, not from right. And so that's a question that remains to be seen. But so his body is put on display. Officials also announced plans to install statues. and portraits and towers to his immortality across the country. Kim Jong Il becomes a flower that you start seeing everywhere. And now, like, all of the displays have Kim Jong Il and Kim Il Sungya on Kim Il Sung stuff. And now but it's almost a mirror image, which is what he wanted. He wanted to be revered in the same way that his dad, even if the sincerity that went behind it wasn't there. On January 12th of 2012, he was declared the eternal leader, right? So his birthday of 16th of February is already the greatest auspicious holiday of the nation, called Day of the Shining Star. In February of the year that he died, on what would have been his 71st birthday, he was made Daewonsu, which is Grand Marshal, Generalissimo, top military rank of what he would have ever gotten. And in February of 2012, they declared the Order of Kim Jong Il in his honor, and was awarded 132 individual services for building the nation. Right. So this is it. This is his moment. Right. Like, this is like he by crook or by hook created the apotheosis that he wanted for his family. And so then comes the succession of Kim Jong Un. And I don't want to dwell on Kim Jong Un too much. And I think that there's a lot to be said for him, right? We've treated him already in very much the same way that we've treated Kim Jong Il, which is to say that he is a caricature for us. He's a little bit heavy. He's got a weird haircut. He grins a lot in a very unique way. And he's also presented on horseback pretty frequently. There's actually video of him riding horses through the snow, which is very traditional in North Korea. But there's a lot of reasons to think that this relatively young leader, absolute ruler of this country, might be a little bit different. Early in his rule, there was a consolidation of power that involved a lot of like killings. Right, a lot of executions, some pretty brutal ones. People flamethrowered to death.
Right.
People, I think, like cannoned to death, which is something that's or even like an anti-aircraft gun to death. And if you see the damage that an anti-aircraft gun does to an aircraft, you can only imagine what it does to a human body. Feeding to dogs is another thing that you've heard, and all of these extremely vicious things that are now par for the course in either the West's interpretation of North Korea, or actually are happening in North Korea, and there's good reason to believe that is how they punish political dissidents and people that they think is a threat to their power. But beyond that, there have been moves at opening up North Korea. North Korea has a burgeoning small restaurant scene. People are allowed to open restaurants and cook for each other now. There's an opening up of the economy for investment from countries that don't have it under a stranglehold like the United States does. And there's definitely a willingness of Kim Jong Un to be a more realistic dealer in the world stage, because he does not have a lot of the theatrical traits that maybe his father did. I think it's important to note that he was a relatively shy kid, that he loves basketball.
Right, and that's where Dennis Rodman comes in.
That's right. Dennis Rodman came in and was basically a cultural ambassador to North Korea. And he loved that era of U.S. basketball in particular. Big Michael Jordan fan, and I bet you anything he's watched the Michael Jordan documentary that I haven't watched. But there's a lot of reason to think that his view of North Korea and what can happen there is different and a little bit less intense than that of his dad. And I think that has a lot to this image that I put here of him on the horse is important because it was hard for me to find.
Oh, that is a
All
good
right.
indication you're onto something. When it's difficult to obtain, you know it's good.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that really that speaks to that, and that is one of the things that makes me think that maybe he's going to be all right is the fact that a lot of North Korean propaganda. There's a website called, I think it's called visitnorthkorea.com or Visit People's Republic or Visit DPRK. DPRK, Visit DPRK. That has like English language resources for like official state English language resources for folks, and we'll put this in the episode description so folks can go visit it, because it's a really interesting thing. But they have official propaganda and pieces, and none of them included this picture. And all of them, like the visual style of North Korea now looks like sort of that looks, I would say it looks more like 1980s, like 2002 UK style, which is just a lot of Photoshop, like slapping things on top of each other, and a lot of like visual elements,
Right.
that look a little bit tacky to our eye now, but and it's definitely an advance from kind of this 50s style art that we're looking at here, that Kim Jong Il was enamored with, and basically took with him into the early parts of into 2010, 2011 was still being used as the primary way of communicating propaganda. The other thing is he's opening up stores. He's opening up some businesses, and I think one of the most glorious, like sort of weird things, and we talked a little bit about it, is that Kim Jong-un is opening up water parks.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I mean, all things aside, right? Like a country with water parks and amusement parks, and a country with economic hardship as North Korea has, and a history like North Korea has, to be focusing on the mental well-being of some of your folks, making sure that there is place for relaxation and fun.
Right.
Speaks of a different mentality and a different style of leadership than the two leaders that were forged, one in the fights for liberation from the Japanese and the Korean War, and then the second basically under the shadow of their father and frustrated artistic attempts, and someone whose view may not be whose view and understanding of the country that they rule may not be entirely dictated by internal struggles and fights, but rather something a little bit more possibly benevolent. But I do want to say that the place that North Korea currently occupies on the world stage would not be possible without the nuclear program that was started with Kim Jong Il. And it is their eternal, like it is the insurance of the North Korean state that they will not be invaded and they will not be meddled with, to have those nuclear weapons. And every time they shoot a missile into the ocean, every time they thumb their nose at the Americans, as they do and they have been doing for years, it's a reminder that of just how much that this country has been through, and that their national identity, Juche, is about self-determination and self-reliance, and that they will open up amusement parks and water parks on their own terms and not under the terms of what eventually collapsed the Soviet Union and China or anybody else. And I think that's that, understanding those things and understanding, what little we do understand about Kim Jong-un, and really there's like, it's small. Everything that I've read about him contains basically the same 5 details. But I think it's hope for some optimism, and I can understand why Trump was fooled into like jumping in bed so quickly because it is fuel for optimism, but it's also they're going to do it on their own terms, and as a country that doesn't like that, the U.S., it never sits well with us. Mm-hmm. And they don't play with others. It's not that they don't play well with others; they don't play with others. Period.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand that going in, that they're going to do whatever they want, like we could ask them to take down their nuclear arsenal forever. They're not going to do it. Why would they do it? Why would they do it?
Right.
Why, if you understand anything about North Korean culture and who they are, why would you ever assume that they would take away their trump card and take away their insurance and put themselves in a danger that historically speaking they've been afraid of for years. So so that's it. That's North Korea. Any parting thoughts on that? I know that like I always tend to go on rant like at the tail end of these.
No, it's good. It's nutritious information. Dan, I want to make sure you've.
Well, there's just a lot to unpack, right? This has been like counting last week, like almost 4-hour show.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah.
For 50 years, no, for what, 60 years of existence. I mean, Korea's been around for thousands of years, but this particular slice of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In this thing. So there's a lot to go on to go with there. I think it's interesting. The psychology of the Kim family is interesting to me. Not that I know anything or much about psychology, but like when we were talking on a text earlier this week about how I said that Kim Jong Un is a kid of the 80s, right? Water parks, such an 80s thing, right? And then his dad was like such a kid of the 50s, like movies and
big rubber monster suits.
Yeah. I mean, almost more than just that family is what's fascinating, even more than the country itself.
Well, and I think that's why we focus so much on that family, is because that family like defined and continues to define what that country is. And decisions made by Kim Jong Il led to the Korean War. And the deaths behind the Korean War, whether they want to admit it or not, right? And the U.S. was hella heavy-handed in the way that it approached that stuff. And South Korea was pretty terrible as well. But they started it. Kim Jong Il started it, right? And
well, there is a belief that North Korea is, and it's part of the mythology, is they are the rightful rulers of the Korean people.
Peninsula. Yeah.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
And they're, that's part of their mythology. And that might be changing, like you said, with a new leadership being more realistic possibly, but it's a fascinating place.
Yeah.
And without it we'd never have MASH. So.
There you go. Right. There you go. Which is a great movie.
Great movie and TV series.
It's an okay TV series. Never could get a TV series. Oh, you know what we didn't do? We didn't share what we were drinking, and I'm almost done with it. I drank an Aperol Spritz because that's what we were drinking for Mother's Day brunch.
Oh, nice. Well, those are delicious.
Yeah.
Did anybody think of Hennessy? No one?
No.
Should have. Oh, look at that!
Wow.
Got
it. Would you?
Huh?
Got it.
Very well
look
done.
Look at you. Very nice. Very nice.
Brilliant.
Probably go with Hennessy next time. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite drink.
And we gotta pick what to do next time. And I feel like we've jumped. We've done definitive eastward like walk, right? We started like in Sicily. We did the with the bubonic plague, and then we jumped to
Romania,
Wallachia, and then we did Australia, and then we did North Korea. I think it's time we kind of head back west, and do something Western. And I think, like, I got to tell you, Dan, like we talked about the English Civil War,
Yeah.
and it got me a little.
That's a big one. That's gonna be another
two-parter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I'm thinking we should probably chop it up and maybe do a maybe just do the reign of Charles the First.
Okay.
And what a mess that was, and how that ended. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but I think that the reign of Charles the First is kind of it's a good cautionary tale, and it's so formative to the UK that might be like a fun place to go.
It's a good one because you really not only formative to the UK, but pretty essential if you start digging it back into it to the formation of the United States. So much of what we were going through and all of it, and the colonization had to do with that. So
yeah. All right, so we've decided here and now. Brassy seemed strangely quiet as Dan and I plotted that.
I was very curious where you guys thought you were going to go, because your idea of West, and I wondered if we were going to do something deeper into the North American West, or if we were going to do west of the globe. I was very curious about where you were going. If that's where your heart.
I think we'll do a few Western ones.
So I think,
like American West.
So we've been really good at not jumping around too much and being like having a linear thread about like how we're thinking about these things. Like, because when we were talking about Korea, when we were talking about Australia, we had a show and tell that led us to Korea, right? And when we were talking about the plague, we were talking about blood and kind of led us to Dracula, right? And
right,
so
right.
I think that this is a natural place, but whenever you deal with England, you're basically dealing with proto US.
Yeah.
And I know Dan's chomping at the bit here to get some US history, and so who knows where we'll be 2 weeks from now, Dan? Who knows?
Right.
I do also want to advocate as my show and tell so this is my show and tell. It's a Xolo dog from Mexico. It's a replica piece of pottery that I already broke. But it is modeled after findings, Aztec findings, toys of these dogs, and I do want to say that right now I'm on a very particular Aztec kick, and I will want to very, very soon start exploring the Aztec Empire, the cannibal empire that is the Aztecs. And I don't know that we'll do Charles the First as well, but I also want to go here soon.
Because in the library we have a replica carving of Coatlicue, the Aztec mother of, well, she's the mother of the Aztec god, the sun god. The snakes in her skirt lady.
Okay, and what's her deal?
Coatlicue, yeah, there's a carving in the library, a replica of the one in Mexico City that's 10 feet tall. I can't wait to get involved in Aztec world.
Yeah.
But if we need to touch base with Chucky the First, let's do that. But
Chucky the First.
Chuckle's
Chucky the First, amazing.
Or what? I'm either way.
By the way, homework for you guys. The best performance of anybody as Charles the First will always be Alec Guinness.
Really?
Charles the First. Absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. What do you got? Dan, do you have any?
I don't have a thing to show. What I was trying to look for is these are my grandfather's medals.
Oh, nice.
But
wow.
I was seeing none of his Korea stuff is in here. This is just all of his World War II stuff. So that was a bust.
Wow. That's very cool.
But
I wanted to show
that's so important, Dan. The Forgotten War.
Right. I never even thought about that. Like on the back it says one of these is Korean, and that's what I was sort of like looking up
Is it
earlier.
the rainbow
I wasn't
one?
paying attention. No, that's the World War II victory medal, but it's labeled on here as the Korean medal, but it's not if you look it up online. Anyway, we'll do this some other day.
That's cool. The day after VE Day. That's very cool.
Right? So what I was looking up, because we were talking about state funerals so much today,
Oh,
is
state funerals. Love me some state funerals, man.
Are you guys familiar with Operation London Bridge?
No.
Oh.
Google Operation London Bridge for everybody. It is the
Oh.
funeral plans for Elizabeth II.
Oh.
And the code word that'll go out to all the code word that goes out to all the media will be London Bridge is down.
Oh.
And then that will start the process of mourning. The process of mourning, right? So I don't want to go into it all because it's pretty extravagant and long. But there's an article on The Guardian here. Hold on. Let me get to where I was. Okay, so the BBC has what's called Mood Music 2, which is sad, and Mood Music 1, which is saddest. And it's a play. They're playlists, and so there will be BBC will immediately go to Mood Music 1, and the guy said, if you hear the song "Haunted Dance Hall Nursery Remix" by Sabers of Paradise, you need to turn on the television. So I guess that will be the
Yikes.
that will be
This sounds like a scavenger hunt.
right?
Leading to a funeral. Like, this is crazy.
Wow.
Little clues.
But, right, and again, like national outpourings of mourning all look different in different countries.
Yeah.
I mean, I would.
Can you guys hear this?
Yeah.
This is it. So when the BBC radio
just heard from Buckingham Palace that our sovereign, Queen Elizabeth II, has passed away. This is indeed a sad day for all the people of the United Kingdom. We turn now to the Prime Minister, who will be delivering remarks on this sad day for our country.
Right?
Right? I can totally hear it. I can totally hear it.
9 days of mourning, and like the process of the people that goes, the public won't know. She'll probably be dead for a couple hours before the public knows. It's fascinating. Wow. And they have like contingencies if she's in Scotland or abroad.
Yeah.
Or on like how to travel, how to get her back, and like
it depends on where she falls. Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome. Read it. Just look it up. Operation London Bridge.
That's amazing.
It's very deep. Wow.
Right.
Bryce,
George VI was called Operation Hyde Park.
The closest thing I can come to a show and tell today is I viewed the Conan O'Brien Abroad. He does like 1 hour special somewhere in the world. Well, he went with Steve Wynn of Walking Dead. He went to the DMZ line between North and South Korea. They were both allowed to enter the building and sit at the table inside a room that is half in North and half in South Korea. You're surrounded by extremely armed guards that are stone face. They look, they have glasses on, they have sunglasses. You can't see where they're looking. They don't give any expression. I swear to God, Conan walked up to one of these armed guards and said, "Oh, you look great. You look like a backup dancer for Janet Jackson." And I thought, this is how we die. This is
Conan.
Like, I love Conan O'Brien, but sometimes his humor is just a shade too mean, and people don't have time to react or respond to the kind of backhanded compliment or the cut down that he's left them with. I swear, I was like, he's comparing proper armed guards to backup dancers for Janet Jackson. This is going to end badly. But anyway, there's a room on the DMZ that's half in and half out where you're allowed to speak with people under the watchful eye of the government. And I found that interesting that they let Conan O'Brien in there and let Steve Wynn in there.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I think that does it for today. Just shy under 7 hours. So
we had a state funeral for for the Korean topic today. We went all
All
through.
right. Thanks, everybody. We'll be
Bye,
back
guys.
next week with Charles the First.
Yep. See you next week.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye, guys.